a new report on supply chain resilience from Sikich and Industry Week. To talk about the results, I'm joined by Debbie Altham, Senior Director of the Technology Team with Sikich. Hello, Debbie.
Hi there, Robert. Nice to talk to you today.
Thanks for joining me. So whom did you survey for this report?
We had a variety of organisations around who were impacted by supply chain, which is generally manufacturing and distribution organisations across a variety of industries. I believe there were around 130 organisations in total.
Okay. So what does the report tell us in general terms about any gaps or weaknesses in supply chains that were exposed by the pandemic?
Look, I think, Robert, what we've seen is that there is significant impact on a lot of clients and a lot of people out there in terms of their supply chain. And I would say number one is the big surprise about their inability to source materials. I think that if you looked at the most impactful part of the supply chain breakdown, it is being able to get goods shipped to the US to be able to bring into their manufacturing processes or distribute across the country.
So even if they were manufacturing in the United States, it doesn't help if you can't get your materials imported in a timely fashion, I'm guessing.
It doesn't. And I think there have been more spin-off effects from the pandemic around shipping and the difficulty with the freight around, with freight costs increasing. So there has been a huge impact, I believe, that came quite slowly, but really has impacted, I think, later in the pandemic than what you maybe would have thought.
Okay, so with these conclusions in mind, and in light of these revelations, what are companies now asking? What are manufacturers now asking of their suppliers?
Well, I think the first thing is to give that higher level of visibility. And that has to go right down the supply chain because, of course, the suppliers are basically struggling with visibility further back in the supply chain. So it is the ability to be able to make commitments to customers. At the end of the day, the people who are working with the end user are wanting to be able to give some level of commitment to their goods or services. And to be able to do that, people are far more disappointed if they don't get delivered what they expect to get delivered. You know, we can all understand that we can have to wait 7 weeks, but if we're going to have to wait 7 weeks, we want to know up front. We don't want to be promised, oh, maybe tomorrow. And I think that's the frustration, is that level of visibility, which requires a little bit of openness that a lot of people haven't maybe had in the past. So it's not only, I mean, we talk about the systems impact of it, but it's also the relationship aspect. And are you prepared to be able to share with the people in your supply chain those sorts of availability metrics? And do you rely on the numbers that you've got yourselves? I mean, can you rely on your suppliers? To what extent are manufacturers diversifying their supplier base in response to these recent trends? Well, certainly we've seen a big move to people who are wanting to go out there and source alternatives and to have alternative sources. So I think that's something that we've seen. We've also talked to a number of companies that are looking to maybe bring more control of that supply chain in by maybe starting to do their own manufacture or bringing their manufacturing locally so they don't have to deal with the offshore shipping.
So here in the United States, does that actually amount to a certain amount of reshoring of stuff that was being done in Asia, China specifically?
Do you know what? I think over time, I don't think anyone's necessarily doing it straight away, but I've seen reports that organizations are looking medium, out 5 years, saying that there may be an incentive to start bringing some of that back to the US.
Yeah. What role is technology playing in their actions today? What type of technology are they embracing right now, and for what purposes?
Well, I think number one, and this is for various reasons. Number one is a cloud. I mean, I think that most organizations have realized that they can't do business as usual if they've got old machinery sitting out the back where people do not have ready access. And that goes everywhere from their sales reps all the way through to their operational people and their manufacturing, out to their connectivity with their bigger and wider supply chain. But within the context of the cloud, I think their enterprise resource planning, we've seen a huge uptick in demand for ERP systems right now.
Really?
Which are the solutions that look at that inventory planning and the ability to, say, promise and make commitments to your customers. So I would have said that for me, it actually feels like another year 2K. I'm old enough to remember Y2K. And
It's a huge
increase in demand on ERP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, ERP has been around for a long time. Nothing new about the technology in general. Are you suggesting that these companies are getting upgrades of ERP or embracing ERP for the first time?
Definitely upgrades. I think a
Yeah.
large majority of the organizations we speak to are already on their first or second ERP. But
Hmm.
what we've found in manufacturing, particularly, is a reticence to invest in those sorts of technologies. And it's surprising how many organizations out there who are struggling along with 20, 30, 40, well, 30-year-old systems,
Hmm.
and are really having to pay a lot of money for the upkeep and for additional staff to get them to glue it all together to make it work.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are seeing there's an efficiency in these new versions of cloud systems that are giving them that visibility. Because I'm going to say the visibility question around supply chain, it's almost as much a challenge to have visibility into your own organization as it is to have it with your partner organizations.
Hmm.
So a lot of organizations, a lot of companies are saying, well, we should start here. We don't know where stuff is within our own four walls. Um,
Yeah.
we get
And
quality data from our vendors, then that will sort of make the whole thing work.
not to mention the multi-tier nature of so many global supply chains. Did your respondents talk about that? Not just visibility up to the tier one suppliers, but up tier two, three, four, five, however, all the way back to raw materials.
Oh, it's going up and down the whole way. And when we see industries like construction, for instance, that are going off the charts right now,
Hmm.
and you'll see the constraints that they have around the supply of those raw materials, it is happening all the way through that supply chain. It is going all the way back to those raw materials, wood products, concrete products, all of the way back. So I think the struggle for organizations is to be able to maintain a good level of customer service and be able to keep their customers by being able to meet their commitments. And they're struggling because there are 1, 2, 3 tiers between them and the raw material issues.
Yeah. With so many production interruptions right now, a lot of these suppliers are strapped for cash and working capital in order to build up the capacity needed to meet demand from their customers. So do they, in addition to that, do they have the capital to invest in these technology solutions and these initiatives in order to achieve success in the future? And do they have the patience of their investors to make those expenditures?
Well, what we've found lately is a far more focus on getting something in and up and running quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're talking about is the speed at which they can do that investment and see the payback. Because I think the idea of payback coming like 5, 6, 7 years out is just ridiculous now. People are looking for a very, very much shortened payback period. So as organizations who like Sikich who deliver solutions for this sort of thing, we're challenged by trying to absolutely connect the investment into something measurable.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not that be something like the improved supply chain management, where KPIs around customer satisfaction can be then linked to competitive edge, we are very much challenged to do that. But also we're challenged to get rid of the periphery and focus on the things that actually change the bottom line. I mean,
Yeah.
oftentimes a new general ledger, which is a typical part of an ERP, isn't going to help them, reduce costs or increase their revenues. So
Yeah.
again, focus very, very much on the areas that are really bringing intrinsic value.
So the big takeaway here, progress or no progress? I mean, are these companies doing things that will help them to shore up their supply chains, achieve visibility, become more resilient, deal with the next disruption? Do you get a feeling from these respondents that there's action being taken?
And I'd say most definitely, certainly from my perspective, the activity that we're seeing across our clients, and if there was never a time to do it, it is now.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that people are moving forward because they feel they have to. There is just simply too much risk there for them not to make a difference, and they will lose their competitive edge, and they'll end up basically on old software but with old solutions, and unfortunately not being able to service their customers. So I absolutely think there's been a huge shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Debbie Altham of Sikich, thank you so much for sharing the findings of this new report on supply chain resilience from Sikich and Industry Week. Really appreciate your insights. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you, Robert.